Welcome to Brewsers, a podcast about beer, coffee, booze, and bruisers. I'm your host, Roddy John, and today we talk to Brian Kendrick about being trained by Shawn Michaels, along with Tracy's mothers, wrestling around the world, and Ronda Rousey, and not to mention Bad Bunny. This is such a fun conversation, and Brian Kendrick was could not have been nicer, and we talked about all of that and so much more. I can't wait to get for you guys to listen to this. But first, make sure to go sign up for our newsletter. It comes out twice a week. You get to eat more information about our guests. You get fun facts, and you get to find out what's happening with your favorite podcast all about beer, coffee, booze, and bruisers. So without further ado, here is Brian Kendrick. I would like to welcome to the show Brian Kendrick. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, John, and yourself?
I'm doing very well. So I guess the first question I have, what is your earliest memory of pro wrestling?
Okay, so my earliest memory of pro wrestling would be little like flashes. So I remember flashes of there being a WWF cartoon. I remember an animated Junkyard Dog. An animated Hulk Hogan. This is the first thing I remember of pro wrestling. But the actual watching it was going over to a friend's house. They had just rented WrestleMania 6. I was going to play a board game, and they were watching wrestling. Wasn't into it, didn't know it. And I walked in as the main event was starting, and Ultimate Warrior's running to the ring, and that was it. My life changed. I fell in love with the Ultimate Warrior. And just from there, Coco Beware and just what wrestling is, and that was it. So about 10 years old, I suppose.
Yeah, I think my parents told me I was around maybe 3 or 4, and they were, I think, flipping through the channels, and then something caught my eye, and I told them to just keep it on there, and then I've been watching ever since. So
is that so? Before you even have memories, you've been watching?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive.
And I turned 40 this year, so yeah, I've been watching wrestling for almost 40 years myself.
Did you ever take a break? So many people do. Even guys that become pro wrestlers, they stop in high school because it's nerdy or whatever. Did you ever stop watching wrestling?
It's funny you ask that because I have had so many friends. Because I'm the wrestling guy for everybody that that knows me. So multiple people have taken breaks. They've gotten in and out of it, and I was completely consistent. And I actually learned about other pro wrestling because I was flipping through the channels myself, and I'm going to date myself here in a second. But I caught Dustin Rhodes on WCW, and I was like, what is this? And so here's where I date myself. I picked up the TV guide, and I looked at, okay, what day is it? What time is it? And you have to go down. Like, what is a WCW? So I was like, okay, there's more wrestling out there?
7:05?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I learned that, and I was like, oh, no, you're good. And so now I was like, okay, now I got even more great stuff to watch. So then I was bouncing back and forth. And, of course, then later they started Monday Nitro, and I was like, okay, well, now I really have to flip back and forth between the TV because obviously back in the day, you could record it and try to watch it later, but you're watching it live because otherwise you're not catching it.
Well, and on top of the fact that, you might have had multiple TVs in a house at that time, probably by the mid to late 90s, multiple TVs, but maybe not 2 VCRs, maybe just the 1 VCR in the living room. If you didn't catch it, you didn't record it, didn't have a friend that did it, it just disappeared. And on top of it, the VHS is so I would say it's flighting. It will die. With each view, there's something special about it, and I don't know. It was hard to consume wrestling as a kid, and I couldn't get enough of it. Sounds just like you.
Yeah, same, exactly. Yeah, what's funny, I didn't really know about the tape trading until way later. When I realized, wait, I could have got tapes from watching stuff from Japan, maybe England or anywhere else. And so I feel almost slighted that I missed that.
I did find out about tape trading. when I was a senior in high school, and that's how I was able to get Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid, the best of collections. And boy, wow! I mean, it was amazing. It made it seem like pro wrestling was more obtainable. That there's such a world out there. You don't have to be a giant or super charismatic. You just be good at something. And yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, it is funny you say that because over in Japan and, England, size didn't really matter as long as you were a great performer and you were able to, fully get the crowd into it, as opposed to over here where, I've heard now Vince had the airport test where unless you get people in the airport like, oh my God, what is that guy? You have to be over 6'4", basically. You have to be well over 200, 300 pounds to really pass that test. But over in Japan and England, as long as you made people entertained and captivated, that's all you need.
Yeah, I guess it's because they're relying on an audience of wrestling fans, I suppose, people that understand wrestling, appreciate wrestling for what it is, as opposed to, and what hooked me was Vince's formula, the Ultimate Warrior. That's what hooked me, and I think what would hook the average channel changer. And so it's been very different, WWF and WCW. I was just like you. I didn't discover NWA, WCW until later on, flipping through channels. And they just looked old and out of shape, moved different. But it was different, and I love that stuff. I study that stuff now, but it was so different than what Vince had.
Yes. Oh, very much so. As much as Vince, cared about the wrestling, he was obviously far more interested in the entertainment aspect of it. Hence the cartoons, the Hulk Hogan, like you said, Ultimate Warrior. I mean, Ultimate Warrior, I was an Ultimate Warrior guy when I was a kid. I was not a fan of Hulk Hogan. So if we could have more people like that, I was like, let's do that. Which is funny because, years later you hear about how much of a bad things Ultimate Warrior was doing behind the scenes and in the ring that you're like, oh man, it kind of tarnishes it a little bit, but it's still that larger than life character really obviously brought, you and I in and millions of other people into pro wrestling.
It was magic.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that the boss would always love to have at least one Ultimate Warrior around. That's just a superhuman and full of electricity. I love him. I know that there's a lot of wrestlers that worked with him contemporarily. A lot of wrestlers I look up to that did not like him. But I have the ability to separate the art from the artist because I never met the artist and I never will at this point. Luckily for me, I can still enjoy his work.
Yeah. I mean, I have the same thought process when it comes to a certain Canadian wrestler that most people don't like to talk about. So I'm able to kind of separate, unfortunately, what he did in his later days and then what he did in the ring. So, I understand the separation.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a shame for any young wrestler who wants, like somebody who wants to become a wrestler, study wrestling, to not study Chris Benoit because of, the last week of his life.
Right.
It'd be a downright shame because you'll be missing on something. And not only that, then like now his wife and son, like by forgetting that Chris Benoit existed doesn't help their memory at all. It just helped further disappear them. And by making him disappear, if it does have anything to do with concussions or, drugs in the past or whatever it might be, for us to just pretend that didn't happen, well, we could be preventing the next tragedy if there is any correlation between the two. I don't know if there is, but you get what I'm saying.
No, I completely understand. And there is an argument to be made that if the unfortunate incident or the event that did happen, if it didn't happen, where would we be when it comes to concussions? Where would we be when it does come to drugs and, the whatever was happening behind the scenes and, obviously the mental health aspect of it too, because, I mean, if anybody saw the Dark Side of the Ring, you saw that he was extremely affected by losing his best friend, Eddie Guerrero. So, I think it was just a combination of everything that, you really had to, unfortunately, it did have to happen for us to put a spotlight on it so that people later could not have to worry so much when it does come to concussions or the drug use that was happening backstage or the spotlight on the mental health situation.
And if he was a mediocre wrestler, none of these issues would have been highlighted.
Right.
Yeah. I hope. Yeah. I don't know. It's what can you say other than it's a tragedy, and that's all there is to it. His the waste of lives and the waste of a brilliant career that is essentially disappearing. Life can be cruel.
True. Now, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about you.
Okay.
I read, I did read that you grew up in Virginia and then you moved to Washington. How did you then get from there down to Texas to go to wrestling school?
Chasing a dream. Yeah, I lived in Washington State, and there was no wrestling schools that I knew of at the time. Reached out to several wrestling schools, found one that accepted me in NWA Southwest, which was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And did my class. It was fun. It was fine. But, I wanted to do this for a living. And so I sought out additional training, looking for Jose Lothario. Shawn Michaels opened up a school, and that was it. I moved back to Texas again from Washington to chase the dream of being a pro wrestler.
Wow. Now, I read that you were also trained by Tracy Smothers. Was that up here in Dallas?
No, so originally I was trained in Dallas by two gentlemen, Kit Carson and Chris Germany. Very nice guys, good trainers. From there, I wound up going to San Antonio, training with Rudy Boy and Shawn Michaels. When I got signed to developmental, that's when William Regal and Tracy Smothers, they were both sent there, not as coaches, but nobody was. And so they took it upon themselves to help out the eager. And so, yeah, I was lucky enough to get a train under both those guys.
Wow. Now, I guess let's first start. What did you learn, I guess, the most under the learning tree of Shawn Michaels? Also, what state, was this Shawn Michaels when he was becoming sober, or was he still having his issues?
This was Shawn Michaels post Mike Tyson. So that yeah, so it was right before he came back to SmackDown as the commissioner. When SmackDown started, so right in that era, 1999. What I've learned essentially from him, I don't know if it's so much learned or whatever, but what I got from being around him was you just do it or you don't. Here's my opportunity. Am I a wrestler or not? Am I going to put in the effort? And I guess I did. I'm not a good athlete. Not really good at anything. I was just determined to make it through the class, and then when the class was done, I was determined to take it again and again and again. And so I got moved to Memphis.
Right. Now, do you, again, I was trying to figure out how to word this. You bounced around after your first stint with WWE to a lot of independents. Do you feel that you maybe got signed too early and you maybe weren't ready for it, or was it something that you had to go through that to get to the other side to where you were?
Oh, I think it was a huge advantage to me getting signed that early. Yeah, otherwise I would have been, struggling on the indies and just like guys do. But what I'd have to do then, like all these guys have to do, is find motivation. Okay, maybe someday. Okay, maybe someday. Just keep working hard. Just keep working hard. By getting the opportunity that early, I knew it was obtainable. It wasn't just a ghost.